Ben and I caught up over lunch a few weeks ago at Middle Child Clubhouse in Fishtown. I want to give them a shout out for their approach to literally everything. First off, their clubhouse policy is just 3 sentences. The customer is not always right. Middle child is not always right. And by working together, we can make it right for everyone. I'm really hoping that our industry continues to shift towards standards they have set, including fair wages for back-of-house employees and the emphasis on mental health care for their employees. Also, their liberal use of mayonnaise on their sandwiches is probably not great for my cholesterol, but damn is it delicious. Speaking of their delicious sandwiches, they also offer gluten-free bread as an option, using local bakery taffets. When I had suggested Middle Child Clubhouse for lunch a few weeks ago for Ben, I wouldn't learn until I picked him up that he was recently put on a low Fodmap diet, which includes avoiding gluten. I probably only got into discussing FODMAPs in Season 1 in the episode Hold My Beer with Christine Fisher, but these are essentially carbohydrates found in a variety of foods that cause serious stomach issues for certain folks, including me. So for me, this includes gluten, lactose, garlic, onions, and a huge list of other fruits and vegetables that I have to try and avoid. When I was first dealing with all of this back in 2018, it was one of the many things I was going through at the time, but starting to see a therapist really helped me process my new reality of what I could no longer eat. Ben also let me know over lunch that he also recently started going to therapy. The first therapist he was paired with wasn't quite the right fit, but he finally found someone that works for him. I was absolutely thrilled to hear this, especially since you'll hear towards the end of this episode that he wasn't doing anything for himself in terms of self-care. He knew he needed to be doing something, and I'm glad that he's carving out the space for himself. He's getting towards the end of the semester, so I emailed him over the weekend to see how his classes were going. Unfortunately, I didn't hear back from him for a few days, and when I did, it was to let me know that his partner Lauren had COVID. You remember Lauren from earlier this season, Miss O, the elementary school teacher? So I think we can safely assume where she caught it, but I immediately asked Ben if he was in need of some low FODMAP soup. Remember how I said last week I had a freezer full of soup? Well, I was more than happy to drop off a variety of low FODMAP soups on their doorstep. That should cover a few days worth of meals. Ever since Ben returned to Temple as a professor, he's been trying to encourage me to get back into academia, and it appears he has finally succeeded. Not only did he help me get my graduate thesis published over the summer, you'll hear about more in this episode, but over lunch, he let me know that there were a few classes in the education department for which I'd be a great fit as an adjunct professor. I needed 3 letters of recommendation, so who better to ask than Ben himself, Daniela, my amazing producer, and last week's guest, Hillary Ray, who helped me with my public speaking confidence. 2022 is looking to be a busy year between MG the venue specialist and teaching, so stay tuned for updates as we get closer to spring semester. In the meantime, thank you so much for listening and enjoy the following episode, Ticket to Motivation, Education, and Intoxication with Ben Torsney. My guest today is Dr. Ben Torsney. He is a professor at Temple University. He's also my personal favorite former D3 basketball player. He is partners with Lauren, who is also on this season of Beyond the Venue podcast. So you've already heard a little bit about their powerhouse of a daughter, our future WNBA star / musical theater star. Ben, how you doing today?
Doing great. I'm slowly but surely holding on to what's left of my summer.
What we did not see this coming. We did not. We started off pretty strong, being able to get vaccinated early on in the summer, and it just took a real steep turn, didn't it?
It sure did. I'm trying to make my mind as blank as possible before I dive back into reality on Monday.
Well, it's crazy. I mean, we met, what year is it? It's 2021. We met in August of 2010.
Yep.
I was going into my second year of the Tourism and Hospitality Management program, and I was working with student activities, overseeing all the student organizations on campus. And so with my role, I shared an office with other graduate students who were working within student activities. So in walks Ben, who's going to be taking over the Greek life, which you were not a part of Greek life to begin with.
I was not a part of Greek life. No, I wasn't at all.
So
I guess they thought I was responsible.
When you were
I
24,
had a responsible face.
you were 24 at the time. Is that how old you were when you came to grad school?
Yeah, it sounds about right.
I think that was about it. And Lauren and I are closer in age, so um, I was like, "Who's this kid? What's going on?" But you had moved here from Pittsburgh, right?
It's yep, just kind of on a whim moved to Philadelphia. It's
And
like, oh,
we
Temple's cool. Never been to Philadelphia before. Maybe I should move there.
we were in very different places in our lives, and it was just it's funny because I always laugh that I don't know if we ever would have been friends if we hadn't have been forced to share an office together, but we just I feel
No
like
way.
we learned so much from each other just in that year. And I think there was definitely a lot of personal growth, at least from my end, that took place just by learning from this, random D3 basketball player who's obsessed with hip hop music.
I had a great time sharing office with you. 2010 was a cool year.
I
It's
think
a crazy year. It's a cool year
you
though.
probably got to the point of like if this lady plays Phoenix on her Pandora or Spoon one more time, I'm gonna lose it. But we had a good time, and so
No, what was that one song? Animals. Animals. Who sings that song?
Mike
Animals.
Snow, that song would
No.
come up a lot on the Pandora playlist,
Do 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 do
and that's
do.
MGMT. That
That's
entire like,
it. That's it. MGMT.
and you're like, listen, MG, this is who you're
It's
gonna
burned in
put
my
on
brain.
next, and I'm like,
Burned in
I
my
got
brain
you, I
forever.
got you. So I'm glad we stayed friends and just
Yeah,
continued
definitely.
to connect. You stuck around after I graduated. I went off into the beer industry, and you stuck around, and you ended up getting your PhD at Temple. And so
I
what's
did.
your PhD in? What's your specialization?
It's in educational psychology.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So I just didn't know what to do after I graduated with my master's, and apparently I couldn't get a job with my master's. So I was just like, yeah, figure I'll stick around and see if I can get somebody to pay for my PhD, which Temple was very kind and did that. So it gave me some incentive to stick around. It was
And
nice. It was a good few, good run at Temple. I guess it's not over, but it's been a good run.
and they sucked you right back in. You went off and did your own thing and did some fellowships. I know you had that fellowship in Dublin for a little while, and then ultimately moved back to Philadelphia to raise your little family.
They must think I'm responsible. They think I'm a good citizen to roll out for their college. So
So now that you're back
here I am
at
11 years later.
you're back at Temple teaching classes, like what did this last year and a half look like? 'Cause I can't imagine it was easy trying. I keep thinking like this entire, especially with like a year ago, I kept thinking of what it must be like showing up for your freshman year with all this going on, like as an eighth, or even like having been, a young college kid, even in the spring when all this started, don't tell me what to do. Don't tell me how to live my life. I just, I can't imagine being that young and having to follow these rules, to
Yeah,
not
I,
die and stay safe. So what was pandemic professorship like?
it was really hard. It was really difficult. I think, um, when you're, I like to teach. When I teach, I don't like to lecture and flick slides and just like throw information at students. I really want it to be a partnership. I want it to be a conversation. I want us to talk about what it is that you were supposed to read or learn or whatever. Um, that's very hard to do. It's impossible to do asynchronously. Synchronously, it's a little more difficult, but you can still do it. So I think I had some success doing it. But it's still hard, right? Because you're not in the classroom with people. How did I put it? You're separate but together, right? So
Hmm.
everybody's in their house. There's all sorts of things going on at people's houses. Some people are taking class in their car. Some people are taking class in in on their phones. People are inside. People are outside. People are walking. It's utterly insane. So the conversation. You have this is probably like every class. You may have a few people or a handful of people that lead the class and guide the class and can make this happen. And you have other people that may have their cameras off, may be cooking, may have a dog, maybe in their beds. Like it was just kind of mess. It was
Did you
kind of a
tell us
mess.
about a scandalous situation with a roommate where someone had their
Oh
camera
yeah,
on
yeah.
and
I've had students smoke in class, and just, like they just must think like I can't see them, and I obviously can. Like your camera's on, I can see you. It's not hard to pick up 30 boxes like really quickly, right? I've had students, I've had a student's roommate changing. I had a student's boyfriend just like sitting next to her without a shirt on, like wandering around without a shirt on. It's just like things like that. Like one of the classes that I had this summer had a bunch of athletes in it, and I had to say it the first class. I said, "Fellas, you have to put on a shirt for class. This is what like I'm like I said I hate that I have to, but when you're on camera, you have to wear a shirt. Like you just have to wear a shirt." So I don't know. People don't understand the etiquette. I didn't understand the etiquette. I didn't know what worked. I didn't know what did. Like some was good. Some was good. Some of it was good. Some of it was not so good. And I think it really a lot of it really just depends on where you live, what your situation. People that have quiet houses and room to do school are in a great position. I think online learning was good for a lot of students. People that live with a lot of people, maybe the house is noisy, maybe the neighborhood's noisy, whatever, it becomes a bit more difficult for them to really focus. I mean, in some ways, classrooms are good for people, and then other ways, classrooms are bad for people. So you're kind of just seeing kind of a switch. Some people thrived, some people didn't. So we're all just kind of figuring it out.
and
Really,
you're
we had no
going
choice.
back in
We had no choice but to
person
figure it out.
next week, right?
I am, but like this.
But
How this will,
there is a mandate. All was so did Temple implement any sort of school-wide mandate? I think
yeah,
Drexel and Penn both did that with their everybody was supposed to submit their proof of vaccination by I think Labor Day,
yeah,
if I'm not mistaken. But as a city as a whole, I think they're saying students, staff, faculty for everywhere in Philadelphia.
yep.
October 15th, I think, is the deadline, just to give people time.
Well. So if you're gonna do that, and this is actually something that I didn't even consider, you're gonna have to get your first shot by like next week.
Right.
If you're not doing the Johnson and Johnson shot, but if you're doing the other shots that have lag time for that second follow up shot, I mean, you're gonna have to get your first shot by the first week of September. So it just makes it makes me feel bad. I don't want teachers to mask off. I don't. I mean, I don't. I understand why you would do it, and it works out really well if you have a microphone and you're flicking slides. That works really well with a mask.
But trying to have
But if you're,
conversations and connections and have people feel like they're a part of something.
is different, and that's how I think. I hated school. I really hated school for the longest time because I thought because it was boring, right? What am I doing in school other than you telling me what I should know? And then I got to undergrad and I realized like, oh yeah, we can come into class and actually have conversations about how things work, about things happening in the world, about how these things happening in the world relate to things that we've read. And I've really taken that, as kind of my own philosophy when I teach, because I think it's really important I don't care if we even cover the material. What I care about is us having good, solid conversations that's somewhat related to that material. Because I think that's the most important thing about these classes. And they're not like, not statistics classes or math classes or things that are kind of more,
Like black and
I guess,
white.
yeah, where there can be a wrong or right answer. But I think if
And you don't need critical thinking. Like like it is what it is.
you do, yeah. And I think you need critical thinking to an extent, but a lot of it's procedural,
Hmm.
right? So it's like, oh, okay, the procedure. The procedure gets a little bit more abstract the more you go up. That's fine. You know how to get the answer. Whether or not you know what the answer means, that's a whole other story. But I think in a lot of in psychology, for instance, we're thinking about creating theories and understanding theories. But where do those theories come from? Right? Those theories come from different experiences, different people, and ways of testing them. That it's all really just there's no right or wrong answer.
Well,
How
that's
you test it could be right or wrong, but you coming up with the idea and creating it and thinking about it and your lens into it is a very different thing. And that needs time to talk. You need time to talk about these things, not just say, this is what this theory means, let's roll with it. That's not how it works. And if you think that's how it works, it's a very bad way to go about doing it. So
Well, let's talk about some of your research. I know that you were working on a bunch of different papers during the pandemic. Was the volume of how much research you were doing, it did significantly increase this past year and a half?
yeah, yeah. I mean, I didn't have anything else to do. I
And
didn't have anything else
one
to do.
and one of the
So
papers that you worked on was actually my graduate thesis from 10 years
sure,
ago. Last summer, you reached out and said, "Hey, send me your thesis. I wanna play around with it." And next thing I know, you're kind of asking me questions and asking me to rewrite a little bit of the implications, and we got published
we did.
in the Journal of Leisure Studies. So super
We sure did.
exciting.
We sure
Um,
did. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That was a. I don't know what to do with my time. It's the summer. I'm teaching one class. I'm trying to learn more. So the better way to learn more is to mess around with different data and kind of understand it, right? Because this is what a lot of psychologists do. So I figured you asked a cool question. The question, the question was like, I don't know, how do people, what are people's motivations to attend beer events? And I was like, hey, cool. I study motivation. So let me see what I can do with it. You collected some cool data and it seemed to really work out well. Right. And I think what you came up with or what you found or what we found was, I think, pretty interesting based on how we chopped up how often people drink craft beer. And I think what was our one finding is that those who drink craft beer often go to craft beer festivals to get drunk. So what does that mean for you all? You all craft beer drinkers. Is that why you go to festivals to get drunk? Because you're not going there to do anything else, or at least that's what the data. Or at least that's what Mary Grace. That's what your data.
I'm
So
curious to see how it would translate now because all of my research was done in March of 2011, and I can't believe how much the industry has exploded and changed. And even more importantly, now, like as of May of 2021, the just reckoning within the craft beer movement about its toxicity and abuse and misogyny, that folks are finally starting to get called out for their terrible and abusive behavior, and
sure,
finally starting to see some change. And so I know, like, we've had a conversation about trying to look more into that. And because a lot of that, like, abuse and power, you see this in almost every single industry where you've got you know the white male in charge of this entire industry and everybody wants to be a part of it. And so then you're just going to get this cycle of toxic masculinity and
sure.
victims not coming forward with their stories because they want to continue to be a part of this industry. So it just all kind of goes back to both of us being super interested in motivation,
Yeah, absolutely.
so
Yeah, it's always an interesting question to ask why people do things, why they plan to do things, and then why they actually do things.
mhm.
And I mean, craft beer festivals are fun, right? But I think it's a cool question to ask. Like, well, why do you want to go?
I,
Why is it important to go? And I mean,
and it
for
was
me,
interesting too. Well, at the time, it was a lot more limited. Where the summer of
yeah,
2011 is when I started working at Flying Fish, and there were a decent amount of, I guess, festivals going on, but also at the same time, not every single bar was carrying like a good selection of beer. And
sure,
as time would go on, like more breweries are opening up and more bars are starting to carry craft beer, that you're not necessarily having to go to these festivals to like try something new and different. Like, you're surrounded by it. And
yeah,
then on top of that, I think a lot of other festival promoters could see like, oh, I can make money doing this. So now I'm going to throw a festival in this like random ass town just so I can make money doing it.
yeah.
And I don't know, that there were fun parts about working festivals, but it gets real old.
No, I'm sure.
But it was
I'm
super
very sure.
easy collecting the research because, asking people at a beer event, they've already got a beer in their hand or they're waiting in line to get into a beer festival and they have nothing else to do. So they're happy to fill out a survey while they're waiting.
Sure. Yeah, no, as I told you before, you collected some cool data, some really interesting stuff that we
It was
just,
definitely a trip going back through reading the paper because the one thing that stuck out for me was I remember a lot of the authors that I had referenced because I used their
yeah,
names kind of over and over. But the statistical knowledge that was in there, I'll have to give a lot of credit to my professors for helping me
yeah, thank
get
you.
through that.
You're welcome. It was, you did most of the work. It just so happened it was right place, right time, right? I had some free time. I wanted to mess around with something else, and that's what that was there. So it was really cool. Thanks for letting me use it.
Hey, thanks for helping me get published. Super
Yeah, no
exciting.
problem.
Yeah, I'm
Now
a
you can
published
put it on your
author.
resume.
I
You can put it on your resume.
can.
You are now a published author in the Journal of
Podcast host, published author, solopreneur,
Leisure Studies.
unstoppable. Um,
Shout out to Leisure Studies.
Massive shout out to the Journal of Leisure Studies. I'll have to send
That's a
them
Leisure
some
Studies.
Beyond the Venue and MG the Venue Specialist swag as a thank you.
You absolutely should.
Because they already published it, so it's not like bribing. Like it's totally on the level. Like it gets in them a nice thank you card.
Ticket to Intoxication. That's it.
And it's great because your other professor friend who helped contribute to the paper as well.
Yeah.
I think he had a different title in mind because I think it was another publication that we had submitted the paper to. Did they did not like that title?
No, the reviewers did not like it. So Joe put put a new title on it. It just so happened that when we went back to I forgot to change the title in the system. I forgot to change the title in the system, and actually, it worked out too because the Great Escape part that the name was supposed to be fit pretty well with the introduction, which it was, and then Ticket to Intoxication. I think is a far better title than for the paper,
It's
and it just so
snappy.
happened that it stuck, which I'm really happy about. And now I have a paper called Ticket to Intoxication, which is sweet. I should name all of my papers after getting fucked up somehow. But sorry, you can put your warning on now. some sort of reference to getting fucked up.
What were some of the other research papers that you worked on?
So I've been working with a friend on ways to make I guess processes that lead to taking environmental action or action to be a steward of the environment. So that's one of the papers. Also been thinking a lot about resilience and what resilience is. And I don't necessarily like how resilience has been thought about. I think it's really easily. We all had an ability to bounce back, right? Probably what we consider resilience, and I think it's buzzword, and I think it gets, at least in my field, it gets thrown around a lot. I think the problem is that people don't necessarily think about what it means, and the label that you put on somebody as being resilient may or may not be a good thing for that person, depending on kind of where the other things going on around them, those are social supports, where they come from, all of those kind of things. So I've been working on how to rethink about resilience, because I don't think it's fair to label people as resilient, because I think that has a whole host of kind of negative side effects to that, right? It's not changing the system, it's telling the person to change. And I think the system needs to change as opposed to the person. So there's other constructs of psychological, I guess, constructs to think about that don't necessarily take resilience into account, or they don't take the person's psychology into account. They take what's happening around the person as something that's making the person's psychology kind of emerge, right? So it's kind of two different ways of looking at it. One way is saying do better yourself, right? Which is a very American Western way of doing things. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Do your own thing. You have grit, right? Be resilient. The other way is saying there are all these systems that are making you do this, that are making you act this way or behave this way or think this way. that need to change, because what may be good for you now and you being resilient now may have really bad health effects for you moving forward. So in
Interesting.
order to stop that, something needs to happen at a much larger, more abstract level than, say, you know, Bill, you have, just be grittier, just be stronger, right? But that's not it. Bill doesn't need to be stronger. Bill's already strong. The systems around Bill need to change for Bill not to have to be as strong as he is. That's kind of where I am now. So the concept that I'm thinking about is it's called John Henryism, which comes from the story of John Henry. If people don't know the story of John Henry, John Henry was a steel driving man who died at the end of a contest with a steam drill after beating the steam drill. So he won, he was successful, but died at the end. So I'm thinking about this in terms of resilience, what resilience means, how we're treating people that are quote unquote resilient, and why that may not be a good thing. So that's kind of where my research is now. Have I had anything published on it? Not yet. So hopefully soon. I've presented a couple times on it, and people seem to like it. But I would really like to have an article published on it, on this John Henryism thing, because I think it's really important, and I think
absolutely.
And I think it's far more. I think it's. And I teach in a university, right? And at universities, there's varying levels of power and privilege in universities, especially in a classroom, right? So you may get, universities are very different from, say, high schools, right? You may have Radnor High School where everybody's parents are, or majority of everybody's parents are really well off, or upper middle class or whatever. When you get to Temple, you have people from Philly,
Everywhere.
New York, DC, suburbs of New York, suburbs of DC, suburbs of Philly. It's a very different thing. So to say that, student X, Y, or Z is resilient may not be a good thing, right? We have to think about why they're persisting in doing the things that they're doing, as maybe compared to the people that are in their classes with them. But what that means is that there needs to be different kind of supports for those students. What those supports look like, I have no idea, right? But I know that there has to be different. There has to be a different way of thinking about why students are grinding through something, and whether or not they actually need to be doing that. So that's kind of that's thoughts down the line about, well, what are these places that, what are these institutions, and how are they supporting or not students? And I think a lot of the way that we're doing it is through language, right? Do these people have John Henryism, or are these people resilient? One will get you one place, another word will get you the other place. So that's kind of what I'm thinking about now. Whether or not any of those things will be published soon, who the hell knows? Hopefully they will. But that's kind of
I believe in you.
my thought.
I think that sounds fascinating. I'd definitely be
interested
in reading more about that.
Well,
so I know you go back Monday. What does your class schedule look like? Like we had already talked about, you'll be wearing a mask for your classes, and the students are going to eventually need to be vaccinated. So what are you teaching? I know you've got some super interesting classes lined up for this fall.
Yeah, so I'm teaching a class on interpersonal communication. I don't know, I've never taught it before, so we'll see.
What does that really mean? Like, what is that?
We're this.
So how to have conversations with other people, or like how to?
I talk a bunch of shit, but I'm thinking about, I think one of the reasons that things are so problematic is because people can't talk to other people.
Oh, absolutely! I could not agree more.
We have no interpersonal communication with people who are different from us. So it is. I mean, I was at a conference last weekend, the virtual conference last weekend. I was listening to the guy. His name is Glenn Washington. He does the show Snap Judgment on NPR. But he's talking about, we don't know each other's stories. So we just don't know each other's stories. And I was like, you're absolutely right. We don't know each other's stories. We don't communicate with people who are different from us. We don't know the stories of anybody else. And I was like, that's how I'm thinking about this class. Like, we just are going to have to learn just how to tell other people our stories and somehow get and be able to for them to tell us their stories. That's as far as I've gotten so far. That's as far as I've gotten so
No, I think that's
far.
super interesting because I mean, there's so many different ways to look at this. I know kind of the ruts that you can get into when you're meeting new people. It's like, so what do you do? And then, or
Yeah,
like, tell me about yourself. And, not everybody wants to talk about their job. Like, I know I've had to
no,
learn with Bob, he's like, stop telling people I work for Johnson and Johnson because he's like the second that somebody talks about something I have to immediately, like, if they complain, like, he's like, ethically I have to immediately like stop what I'm doing and like essentially like take that complaint. I'm like, oh, that's so it's just kind of going back to like you don't know someone else's story, that why would you
sure,
ever think that you would think just, oh, why does it matter who my employer is? And if you're going to share with
absolutely,
me an anecdote, it just going to spiral out of control. And not I'm always a person that has to work in a job that I'm passionate about, and not everybody's like that. So for me, especially owning my own business, I'll talk about it all day. Also being an only
sure,
child, I have no problem talking about myself. But
sure, sure,
on the flip side, some people like it. So I think that's kind of like a common question that's being brought up right now is when you're meeting new people, not in a networking session, if you're at a party or meeting friends of friends, like how are you introducing yourself, or how do you want people to introduce themselves to you?
sure.
And it's definitely something I think a lot of us have kind of struggled with as far as easing back into talking to people in real life again, where we got
Sure,
so
sure.
affixed to the Zoom calls and trying to converse in person once again. It was an interesting transition for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think a lot of, at least in my experience, a lot of networking events can be very superficial, right? So you're not getting to know people. And I think when we don't, as human beings, what we do is when we don't know things, we fill in the gaps. It's what our brain does, right? Our brain fills in the gaps for things that we don't know, and whether or not that those things that we fill in the gap with are, those come from knowledge that we have, or knowledge that makes sense to the knowledge that we have. So that's, getting to have a deeper understanding of people, especially people not like us, is I think really important. And the way to do that is to know people's stories. The problem is that takes time, that takes effort, that takes all sorts of different kinds of skills. But yeah, we'll see. I've never taught this class before, so it could be great. All I know is that we're going to be doing a lot of talking, because that's
That's what you got to
how
do.
you interperson. There's going to be a lot of talking, and there's going to be a lot of understanding people's body language. So there's that. I'm also teaching a class on hip hop that I created. So it's like race. So it's like examining race and diversity through
You
the lens
created the
of hip
class,
hop.
not the hip hop, right?
No, I wish
The
I
way that
created the
that
hip
was
hop.
phrased, the hip hop that I created.
No, I wish I created those. I created the class, correct. So I've never taught this class either. So we'll have to see. We'll see how that goes. The reason that I wanted to create it is because, well, I like hip hop. I want to, I want to be able to listen to rap music in class and get paid to do it. So those two things are great, right? So, and then
Why
I
do you think
think,
I taught fundamentals of beer for a year and a half? I
that's
mean,
right.
checked all the right boxes.
And so I'm thinking, like, what better way? And then it makes me. I mean, hip hop and rap music's everywhere, right? There's rap music, which is kind of the style, and there's hip hop, which is more of a culture. But but the things that are ubiquitous in our culture now, rap music, whether how and there's variability in that too. There's some really good rap music, there's some really bad stuff. But I think one of the ways to think about culture is to think about some of the popular art forms that are there. And I think, well, race and diversity is really important for students to learn about. And what better way to do it than through rap music? So I think it'll be really cool. I think it'll be really cool. Learn all sorts of learn about different contexts, learn about, and learn about not only race, but homophobia, masculinity, femininity, uh, all sorts of stuff. So
It's part of
I'm
the
looking
class
forward
because
to
I
it.
know recently, like I don't really know what genre he falls under, but the baby and his transphobic and homophobic comments.
Oh yeah, he's a rapper. He has a day. I put him in. I put him in. He has a day.
But I think
He
that I
and
mean it'll definitely facilitate some really interesting conversation that especially it would concern me if, the students like didn't think that those words were offensive, or something like that. That I think some kids just don't realize how toxic certain things can be.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, they're 18 years old, so a lot of them probably will think that they're completely just fine, right? They'll probably think that it's like, oh, these are my beliefs. My beliefs can be whatever they want. I can have my beliefs whatever they want, But whether or not those beliefs are useful or good for creating community is a whole nother thing, right? But this is a way to understand these. A lot of, I think for me, I don't know. I don't necessarily like some of the newer stuff that's out, but I will listen to some of the newer stuff, just how it sounds, not listen to anything that's being said, right? Because, I'll listen to it when I work out or something along those lines. But, I think it's really important to kind of slow down and take a step back and think about what some of the things mean, right? So like I even put a day that we're going to talk about like the song WAP.
Hmm.
So we'll talk about WAP, what it means, why we should care about it, why why some people think it's empowering and why other people think it's not empowering. We'll see. It should be an uncomfortable class for all of us, but
Oh,
it should be good nonetheless.
absolutely.
But
Yeah.
it should be good. But it should be good nonetheless, right? Because you know, who's to say what's right and what's wrong? But I think this gives a lens into what is how the culture is moving, right? If I can go and make a song and rap about my wet ass pussy, then I'll do that, right? But who is saying that it's bad and who's saying that it's good? So we'll listen to it. I might listen to it 10 times, see how it goes.
How many students are in the section?
I think there's 32 in both sections. I'm teaching two sections.
Okay.
But I think the way, again, the way that I teach these classes, it's a way I want. It's not about me,
You
right?
want
Like
to
this class is
facilitate conversation between the
it's about
students.
them and how they're thinking about these things,
Hmm.
and like what does feminism look like? What does that even mean? Is creating a song called WAP, is that feminism? I don't know. All I know is that it makes from the one little essay thing that I'm going to give to the class. It makes white men uncomfortable. I can tell you that much. This guy wrote this thing in the New York Post about just like WAP being the end, the end to everything. It's the least empowering thing in the world. I'm just like, yeah, sorry, dude. And of course you don't like it. Why would you?
Feel sorry for his wife.
Yeah, right. But I mean, these are things that we need to talk about. That I think are really important that come up in these songs, right? So I don't know. We'll see how it goes. We'll check.
Yeah,
We'll
I'm
check
super
back in
pumped super pumped to
midway
hear
through the
about
semester.
this.
Yeah, yeah, me too. It should be an interesting 15 weeks
Yeah.
to
Woo!
say the least.
Beautiful. Well, I mean, Ben, you have so much going on. What do
There's
you
so much going
do?
on.
So much going on. You've got, a 3-year-old going on 30. What is it that you do to make sure that you're practicing self-care? I mean, I know that you still play basketball. I know you still the gym.
I haven't played basketball or been to the gym since March of 2020.
Oh my gosh. So this is even more important.
Yeah.
What have you been
How do I do
doing?
self care? I don't do self care. I really need self care. I do not do any self care. Yeah, it's been hard to do that. It's been hard to find that time. I mean, I haven't been playing basketball because I'm nervous to play basketball. I haven't been back to the gym because I'm nervous to go back to the gym. I mean, I have a 3-year-old. She's not vaccinated,
Right.
so I could give that to her, and that's just not what. I mean, it's already a risk me going back into the classroom.
Mm-hmm.
Me not knowing whether or not my students are vaccinated. Like, yeah, they'll be vaccinated by March 15th, but I go back on Monday, and October 15th. Monday's not October 15th. Yeah, October 15th isn't Monday, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, who's to say I couldn't get COVID when I first stepped foot in that classroom? So I don't know. I've just been it's been a tough 18 months. So have I been doing self-care? No. Do I probably need to do self-care? Yeah. What that looks like, I have no idea. So we'll see. I mean, everything's always in flux. So, we'll see what happens when I get back into the classroom and I'm finally allowed to leave my house to go back to work, which I haven't done since March of 2020. So I don't know.
Everything was virtual. I guess you were never back on campus for the last year and a half.
Nope.
Oh.
Only to clean my office out. Get some stuff from my office, clean my office out. But now we have now we have renovated offices. I have a new office. Everything's back. Whether or not we'll be back in person for how long, I don't know. We're putting a lot of trust in 18 to 22-year-olds. So
I'm actually cautiously optimistic just in terms of like the generation behind us. Like, I have constantly been impressed of, I don't know, just how cognizant they are of how awful this world is. That
I agree. I absolutely agree.
They are doing so much to fight for change of like all the problems of like the previous generations, and it's really inspiring. So um I'm very curious to see how the next 20 years plays out.
It'll be an interesting 20 years. I think if the last 2 years have been any indication, it's going to be an interesting 20. So yeah, I mean, like, what's it going to be like when my daughter goes to college? Like, what's her personality? What is she going to do?
Years away.
Yeah, it's crazy, right? But I mean, the way things are going, who knows what's going to happen in 15 years, right? I mean, who absolutely knows? I have no idea.
I think we're just I posted to Instagram today. So we ended up changing our travel plan. So we're still going to go to Santa Fe. We're still going to go to Dallas, but we've changed our like vacation portion of our trip from New Orleans to Maine. We feel like it's a lot safer to go to Maine instead.
I would say so. Maine's probably really nice too.
Maine's beautiful. I love it so much. And we were there a year ago renting out the house for 2.5 weeks on the lake house. And it was just, and I can't believe that was a year ago. Totally blows my mind. And then someone had posted recently, like, we've only got 4 months left of 2021. Like 2022 is going to be here in 4 months. And that just makes my brain explode. This year went by way faster than I intended. So while I'm super pumped that we're vaccinated, I'm now completely terrified of the Delta variant and just not only don't want to infect anyone unknowingly, but also don't want to be taken out for 2 weeks.
Yep, I'm right there with you.
So everything's going to be just fine. We're just going to keep masking up. We're going to keep going to places that require proof of vaccination, and we're just going to literally do the very best that we can. Because that's all we can do at this point.
That's all we can do. I was saying when this whole mess started, I was like, let's give 5 years. 5 years before we're completely out of it. Wow. So that was an arbitrary number. Actually, let's do 5 years. But that was my thought. I was like, I think in 5 years we'll be all right. And now we're what, 2 in?
A year and a half in. I guess technically 2 if you count like the original, like from whence it began.
It's tough to put, it's hard to put a lot of trust in people.
I feel you. I totally feel you.
People are crazy.
At least we had quiz though. That was a good time.
That was great. Tim, Dan, if you're listening, really well done. Thanks, fellas.
Total troopers.
I really appreciate it. That was a good way to kill a year. Absolutely good way to kill a year.
What else are you gonna do on a Saturday night when you can't go anywhere?
I did, and I really do think I lost a year. Like there's like March 2020 to basically March 2021. I kind of just like it was the same thing over and over again. I kind of lost that entire year. It almost feels like it didn't happen.
It's definitely a blur. Like I feel like I've got, like my nature vacations and my micro wedding clients to thank for getting me through the year, but everything else, I totally feel you.
It was crazy.
Well, let's talk about something happy. I would love to know what your all-time favorite venue is. Could be anywhere in the world. Any place that sparks joy whenever you think about it.
Oh man, great question. What do I like? Just can I give a couple?
Yeah.
All right. So back home, so I'm from Morgantown, West Virginia. So back home in Morgantown, West Virginia, there's a place called Mario's Fishbowl. It's a little neighborhood bar. I really like Mario's Fishbowl, and they serve beers in these kind of like goblet things.
And schooners?
Really nice. Is that what they're called? I don't know.
Schooners.
They're great. And it's just little bar restaurant, and up on the walls are all these just people just write notes and then just post them on the wall. The place has been there for years and years and years. New ownership, I think, within the last 15 years or so. Actually, I think new ownership now within the last couple years. But I love that place. I go down with my parents, and we hang out down there, drink some beers. It's a lot of fun. There's also this place. So I used to live abroad for a couple of years, and not in Ireland, but in Amsterdam when I was lucky enough to go hang out in Amsterdam for a few times. There's this really cool bar that my friend who lives in Amsterdam would take me to. It's called La Affiche, somewhere in Amsterdam somewhere. It is the coolest little bar ever. And I don't know if this is what you mean by venues, but
it's whatever it means to you.
But I really like it's again this kind of like, I love these smaller, dark, hole in the wall kind of bars where you can just sit and chill and drink beer, and there's like nothing pretentious about it. I think it's the best thing ever. But those are two of my favorite places.
Well, if you ever find yourself in Koblenz, Germany, there is a place called Mephisto that was one of my favorite spots to go to in Koblenz when I was teaching English there. Nice. That's like exactly what you're describing.
Yeah, these places are the best. Like we could just sit in either of these places. We would just sit for hours, drink beer, no worries. They were just chilling. Like there was nothing there. It's just a good vibe. And there's nothing pretentious with the vibe. It's like, we have beer, we have tables, we have booze, and that's what we have. So it's not, we don't have this decor and this decor and this and this and this and this, and just like, I guess I don't need all that stuff, which I kind of like. But that's just me. I'm sounding like an old man.
You've always been a little bit like an old man.
I'm not on social media.
Yeah, I typically ask my listeners how they can follow you, but you're not on social media at all. So if anybody wanted to talk to Ben more about his classes that he's teaching, or any hip hop recommendations, you can definitely give him your email address if you'd like.
Or any basketball, or psychology. I don't even know what else I like. I don't know, maybe teen dramas. I kind of like teen dramas on Netflix. They're kind of funny. Good way to clear my brain.
Did you watch, was it Never Have I Ever? on
Yeah, of
Netflix.
course. Yeah, of course. It's great. It's great.
I loved it so much. I thought it was so great.
Such a good show. Absolutely easy to watch and doesn't hurt my brain.
It was a good binge watch for sure.
Absolutely. Uh, yeah. Send me emails if anybody listening wants to chat.
Wait, ben.torsney@gmail.com. Is that your email
That's
address?
it.
Okay.
Yep.
Awesome. I'm sure your inbox will be flooded after this episode is released.
Absolutely.
Well,
You can also send me money to please feel free to send me
Venmo at Ben, thanks so much for joining me today. And I wish you the best of luck with your first
Thanks,
week
MD.
back at school next week. Listeners, thanks so much for joining us today. Check out Beyond the Venue podcast on Instagram and check out all of our other episodes streaming now on all your favorite podcast streaming platforms. Have a great day.
Peace.